We used to chase sunsets in Santorini, get lost in the alleys of Florence, and toast to nothing but being alive. But what happens when the person you love forgets why you're toasting? This is not a story about giving up. It's about holding on differently. If you're someone in your golden years, or love someone who is, and wonder if travel is still possible when life throws curveballs like dementia, this story is for you. The love for travel that never left. Travel has always been the rhythm of our lives, the background music to our love story. When we first met, Dawn and I would dream up destinations as easily as other couples planned date nights. Paris was not a fantasy, it was a plan. The Amalfi Coast wasn't just a postcard, we walked it hand in hand, stopping for espresso in sleepy towns where no one spoke English, but everyone spoke warmth. Back when the children were little, we'd arrange for grandparents to care for them and steal away for weeks at a time. Europe became our playground. In Germany, we danced under twinkling Christmas lights. In Scandinavia, we marveled at the long, endless days of summer. When the kids grew older, we took them with us, turning every vacation into a classroom without walls. Luxembourg Gardens, the Vienna Ferris wheel, castles and salt mines. It was all a way of teaching them what life could be when you stepped outside the familiar. And then, as life often goes, the children grew, started their own adventures, and left us with a new kind of freedom. No ballet recitals to work around, no school calendars to consult. We could leave on a whim, travel off-season, chase quieter paths. It was beautiful. We thought we'd spend these years wandering side by side, untethered and unhurried. And in many ways, we still do. The difference now is that we carry more than luggage. We carry time memory and the quiet understanding that each trip may feel more fragile than the last. Still, Don's eyes light up the same way when he hears a new destination. He may not remember every place we've been, but he remembers how it felt. And that feeling, that joy, that wonder is something dementia can't take away. Travel was, and still is, our shared language. Even now it speaks to us. Even now it brings us home. The silent intruder dementia. Dementia didn't announce itself with thunder or warning signs. It arrived quietly, subtle, almost polite. At first, it felt like normal aging. Don misplaced his boarding pass. He asked if our flight was at Terminal A or B twice. We laughed it off. Who doesn't forget things in the chaos of travel? But slowly, that laughter gave way to something heavier. He would grow anxious at check and fumble with basic instructions and get overwhelmed by signs in unfamiliar languages. One afternoon at an airport in Spain, I watched him stand still in the middle of a busy concourse, spinning around, searching for something, me maybe, or himself. Then came Florence. We were retracing steps from a trip we'd adored years earlier. As we approached the same gelato shop where we had shared pistachio scoops under a twilight sky, he turned to me and asked, "Is this your first time here?" It wasn't confusion. It was absence. That moment broke something inside me, not because he forgot a memory, but because I remembered it so vividly. I wanted to hand it back to him like a souvenir we'd dropped. But dementia doesn't work that way. It wasn't just about forgetting places, it was forgetting how to move through them. Where once he'd memorized subway maps and train times, now he panicked if we strayed too far from our hotel. Crowds made him nervous. Noise felt like static. Travel, once his superpower, became his biggest challenge. And yet, through that fog, moments of clarity still shone through. A warm smile when we landed, a quiet squeeze of my hand when I led him to the right gate. He may not recall the route, but he remembers the safety of walking beside me. So we adapted. I became the planner, the guide, the steady presence. I stopped chasing every landmark and instead focused on creating new ones, simple, tender, unforgettable, in a different way. Because even if he forgets the trip, he won't forget how it made him feel, and neither will I. Airports became battlefields. Once upon a time, airports felt like the start of something magical, a buzzing gateway to somewhere beautiful. We'd pack the night before, with excitement get to the airport early, and grab a coffee while people watching by the gates. That feeling, that electricity of going somewhere new was part of what made travel so special. But when dementia became our travel companion, airports turned into obstacle courses, not just physically, but emotionally. Dawn, who once navigated foreign terminals with ease, now looked lost, even in the ones we knew by heart. The crowds overwhelmed him. The noise was unbearable. Announcements over the loudspeaker confused him. He'd ask, "Is that our gate?" a dozen times. And the worst part, if we both went to the restroom and I came out a moment later, then panic would set in. He'd wander searching for me. Those minutes felt like hours. I learned to always hold his hand, to always keep one eye on the exits, and to never, ever assume familiarity meant safety. Security became another battlefield. Shoes off, belt off, laptop out, tiny toiletry bottles in clear bags. It's stressful for anyone, but for someone with dementia, it's like solving a puzzle under pressure. I could see the anxiety build in him. Once, a TSA agent barked an order and Dawn froze, not in defiance, but in confusion. I stepped in, explained, calmed things down, but each encounter chipped away at his confidence. Even simple things like finding our gate or understanding gate changes felt like navigating a maze. One missed sign could spiral into stress, disorientation, and for me, a deep worry I never used to carry. Airports, we realized, were no longer neutral ground. They demanded too much from someone whose mind was quietly rearranging the rules. And from me, they demanded patient strategy and more emotional strength than I sometimes thought I had. Still, we showed up, we adapted, and we began to ask, how can we make this easier? That question led to one surprising answer: a wheelchair. Learning to adapt. The wheelchair revelation. It started with a suggestion from a friend, almost whispered over coffee. "You know," she said gently, "airports offer wheelchair assistance. It makes a world of difference." I brought it up with Dawn before our next trip, trying to keep the tone light. "What do you think about a little help getting through the airport?" He frowned. "I can walk." Of course he could, but that wasn't the point. I didn't push. I let it sit. Because sometimes dignity speaks louder than logic, and the idea of being wheeled around, being seen as less than capable, was a hard one to swallow. But after another exhausting journey, where we'd both ended up frustrated and frazzled, he finally said, "Maybe we try it." So on our next flight, we requested assistance. A smiling airport attendant greeted us at the curb with a wheelchair. She addressed Dawn respectfully, like a fellow traveler, not a burden. and something softened in him. As we moved through the terminal, bypassing long lines and crowded halls, I watched Don exhale. Not just a breath, but a weight. He wasn't navigating chaos. He wasn't worrying about missing gates or losing me in a crowd. He was present, and I was free too. Free from scanning every sign, every crowd, every variable. I could hold his hand and smile instead of managing a dozen silent alarms in my mind. That wheelchair, at first a symbol of decline, had become a bridge back to peace. What surprised us most wasn't just the convenience, but the kindness. People stepped aside with understanding. No glares, no pity, just room. A nod, a gentle smile. Even the TSA officers were more patient, explaining steps slowly, guiding us through with grace. By the time we reached our gate, Dawn turned to me and said almost sheepishly, "That wasn't so bad." No, it wasn't bad at all. It was humane. It was necessary. It was what allowed us to keep going, not just from city to city, but together as partners. And now, he even looks forward to it. He jokes with the attendants. He calls it his airport chariot. And I smile knowing that this small change has given us something invaluable, the ability to keep exploring without fear. Sometimes adapting isn't a loss. Sometimes it's the very thing that makes joy possible again. Kindness of strangers. Traveling with someone who has dementia often feels like carrying an invisible weight, one that only those who've walked this path can see. But sometimes, unexpectedly, that weight is lifted by the hands of strangers. We were in Naples, struggling with our bags and the steep steps of a train. I was trying to help Dawn up the first step while also keeping an eye on our luggage when two young men appeared out of nowhere. They didn't ask. They didn't hesitate. One grabbed our suitcases, the other reached for Dawn's arm, and before I could protest, we were on board, seated and catching our breath. They smiled, nodded, and asked for 10 euros, not out of rudeness, but more as a matter of tradition. I laughed, paid, and thanked them with my whole heart. It wasn't the money, it was the grace. In Copenhagen, a different kind of kindness showed itself. We had packed Dawn's eye drops in the wrong bag, and security was understandably being strict. A younger security agent looked at Dawn's confused expression and stepped forward. She didn't mock, didn't rush. She gently explained the rule, helped us reorganize, and even walked us to the correct gate. I have come to believe that airports and cities are full of good people who are just waiting for a chance to show it. The key is allowing them, letting go of pride, and letting someone open a door, lift a bag, or give directions. It's not weakness, it's grace. Dawn responds to kindness in the most beautiful ways. A warm smile from a cab driver makes him relax. A waiter who speaks slowly and patiently makes him feel heard. When a tour guide puts a gentle hand on his shoulder to guide him, I see Dawn's shoulders lower, his breathing ease. There was a time I thought we had to do this all on our own, that asking for help meant admitting something was wrong. But now I see it differently. We're not meant to walk through this world alone, especially not when it's harder to walk. Every journey now is less about monuments and more about moments. And many of those moments are shaped by people we'll never see again, but who left fingerprints on our memory. Kindness doesn't fix dementia. It doesn't change the reality, but it cushions it. And for us on this winding road, that cushion makes all the difference. Choosing depth over distance, There was a time when we packed our trips like suitcases full to the brim. Every hour accounted for every day a new city. We thought that was how to see the world keep moving, collect experiences, never linger too long. But dementia doesn't operate on a tight schedule. It doesn't care for bucket lists or back-to-back train rides. And slowly, we learned that the pace we once loved now left us drained and disconnected. So we made a choice: slow down, stop chasing, and start staying. Our last trip, we chose one destination: Taormina, a sun-drenched hillside town in Sicily. Instead of 5 cities in 10 days, we spent 2 weeks there. At first, it felt almost wrong to stay put, but very quickly, we began to feel something we hadn't in years: peace. Each morning, we'd stroll the same cobblestone streets, discovering tiny details we'd missed the day before. A different scent wafting from a bakery, a cat lounging in a new spot, a smile from the same shopkeeper who began to recognize us. For Dawn, the consistency was comforting. The stress of transitions, checking out, repacking, navigating new train stations was gone. Instead, he settled into a rhythm. The hotel staff learned his name. Our favorite cafe kept his seat by the window. He could breathe. And for me, it was a gift to stop managing and start experiencing. I wasn't checking maps or rushing to the next stop. I was present with him, with the place, with myself. We took day trips when we wanted, short and guided, always returning to the same familiar bed. No alarms, no agendas, just soft mornings, shared gelato, and long meandering conversations that didn't need direction. I had always believed travel was about breadth, how many places you could see. But now, I believe it's about depth, how deeply you can feel a place, and more importantly, how deeply you can feel each other within it. In slowing down, we've discovered more, not just about the world, but about ourselves. We've learned that a single town can offer countless moments of wonder if you take the time to notice. And perhaps that's the greatest secret dementia has taught us: not how to go faster or farther, but how to stay longer, feel deeper, and love more patiently. That's the journey we're on now, and it's the most meaningful one yet. Finding joy in the small things. When your life becomes anchored by limitations, you begin to look for freedom in the smallest of details. We stopped chasing bucket list attractions and started celebrating tiny, quiet moments, the kind most people overlook. In Taormina, there was a cafe tucked just off the main square, shaded by climbing ivy and lined with uneven cobblestones. We found it on our second day, and it quickly became our sanctuary. The waiter, Marco, had a laugh that reminded me of old radio hosts, rich, warm, inviting. By our third visit, he greeted Don by name, clapped him on the back, and brought over his usual. Not just a cappuccino, but the kind of recognition that wrapped you in familiarity. This ritual gave Don something priceless: predictability in a world that often felt uncertain. He began to anticipate Marco's greeting, the clink of the cup, the soft whoosh of steamed milk. His shoulders relaxed. His smile returned more easily. In those moments, Don wasn't a man with dementia. He was a traveler, a guest, a friend. We filled our days with aimless walks. No map, no timetable. We followed the sun and our instincts. A street musician playing the violin would stop us for half an hour. A bookstore with ancient travel guides pulled us in for longer. One afternoon, we stumbled into a small church during a local wedding. We sat quietly in the back, unnoticed, but entirely present. Children laughed, bells rang, petals floated in the air. Dawn squeezed my hand and whispered, "This is nice." And it was. It was perfect. Evenings were spent on our balcony, overlooking tiled roofs and bougainvillea. We didn't need conversation. Sometimes we simply sat in silence, watching the day melt into the sea. Other times, Dawn would recall fragments of earlier travels. "Did we once see fireworks in Florence?" he'd ask. And I'd smile. "Yes, on our anniversary. You wore that ridiculous straw hat." He might forget again by morning, but in that moment, he remembered, and so did I. Asking for help isn't weakness. I wasn't raised to ask for help. In my generation, independence was a badge of honor. You carried your own bags, solved your own problems, and didn't make a fuss. But life has a way of humbling you, especially when you love someone who needs more than you can always give. Our turning point came in a train station in Rome. The platform had changed, and we had to get across several tracks quickly. I looked at Dawn confused, tired, already overwhelmed. I hesitated, then walked up to a conductor and said, "My husband has memory issues. We need help." He didn't blink. He radioed someone, and within minutes, a transport cart arrived. The driver helped Dawn into the seat, offered me a warm smile, and took us directly to our new platform. No questions, no judgment. That single act changed how I saw everything. From then on, I began to advocate for us, for Dawn, for the experience we still wanted to have. At airports, I requested wheelchair service in advance. At hotels, I asked for quiet rooms and staff who were dementia aware. On tours, I explained Dawn's condition and asked for patience. And almost every time, we were met not just with cooperation, but with kindness. A tour guide in Athens who offered extra time at each site, gently checking in with Dawn after every explanation. A flight attendant in Amsterdam who let us board early and quietly reassured Dawn during turbulence. A museum docent in Florence who took us on a private walk through a quieter gallery when Dawn grew overwhelmed by the crowd. These people didn't just make our trips easier, they made them possible. And the more I asked, the easier it became, because I realized I wasn't asking for favors. I was inviting others to help us hold on to something precious. There is no shame in needing others. There is courage in admitting I can't do this alone. And there is grace in finding out you don't have to. Redefining adventure. Adventure used to mean motion trains, planes, tuk-tuks, bouncing down dirt roads in Thailand. It meant hiking volcanoes, jumping into cold lakes, sprinting through stations to catch that one last connection. But dementia reshapes your relationship with time and space and effort. Now adventure is presence. It's memory, it's emotion, and it unfolds at a gentler pace. One of our favorite adventures in Sicily was simply sitting in the town square, watching people live their lives. Dawn loved the elderly men playing chess on folding tables, their faces lined like the marble statues in the piazza. He'd point and whisper, "That'll be us in 10 years. I'd laugh, squeeze his arm, and say, "We're already there." We tried painting together one afternoon, something neither of us had done before. The hotel offered a rooftop watercolor class, and we signed up on a whim. Dawn's trees looked like broccoli. My sky was purple. We giggled like teenagers. And for that hour, we weren't caregivers or patients. We were just two people holding brushes and letting go of perfection. There was also the bakery challenge. Dawn insisted on learning how to ask for 1 almond pastry and 2 espresso in Italian. Every morning, he'd practice in front of the mirror. Uno, mandorla, biscotti, he'd say. I'd correct him. He'd try again. Eventually, he got close enough that the baker gave him a nod of approval. He beamed the rest of the day. Adventure, we realized, isn't about conquering. It's about connecting with each other, with the place, with the now. And yes, we still get tired. We still have rough days. There are moments when I see the confusion flicker across Dawn's face, and I ache. But then he'll turn to me, completely grounded, and say something like, "This is the best day," and I'll know we're still on the greatest adventure of all. Because the real journey isn't on the map. It's in the moments that can't be planned. The ones that find you when you're finally still enough to receive them. The only thing that matters. As I sit here writing this, I think back on all the places we've been. Not just the cities stamped in our passports, but the quiet spaces in between, the glances on a train, the whispered jokes in museums, the way Don's hand always searched for mine when he was unsure of the next step. Those are the true markers of our journey. What dementia has taken from us in certainty, it has given back in clarity. Not the kind that shows you where to go, but the kind that reveals what's worth holding on to. And for us, it's never been about 5-star hotels, bucket list destinations, or perfect itineraries. It's always been about love. Love in the form of patience when Dawn asked the same question for the 5th time, and I answer it with a smile. Love in the form of courage, booking the next trip even when we're not sure how it will go. Love in the form of presence, putting down the guidebook and just being. And perhaps most importantly, love in the form of memory, not just the ones that fade, but the ones that linger in how we treat each other and how we choose to keep showing up again and again. There was a moment on our last day in Sicily that I'll never forget. We were walking back to the hotel, the sun just dipping below the rooftops. Dawn turned to me and said, "I hope I remember this." And I replied, "Don't worry, I will." Because that's what love does. It remembers. So if you're watching this and wondering if it's still possible to travel, to explore, to feel wonder, even when life looks different, hear this. Yes, it is. You may need to slow down. You may need to ask for help, but the journey is still there waiting. And sometimes, when everything else becomes uncertain, the only map you need is the one that leads you back to each other. So keep going, keep walking, keep loving, because at the end of it all, the only thing that truly matters is not where you've been, but who stood beside you as you went. That, my friend, is the greatest journey of all. If this story touched your heart, you're not alone. Whether you're caring for someone with dementia, navigating aging, or simply learning how to slow down in a fast-moving world, know that your journey matters. Your love, your presence, your patience, they make all the difference. And if you've ever thought that adventure was over, this is your reminder that it's not. It's simply taken a new form. So if this video resonated with you, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear this, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories about living fully even in unexpected seasons of life. We're building a community where love leads the way, and I'd love for you to be part of it.